The most powerful idea in modern geopolitics is also one of the most comforting, because it suggests that nations, when bound together through a shared defense agreement, can eliminate vulnerability by distributing it, turning individual weakness into collective strength. And this belief has shaped decades of global stability, embedding itself so deeply into strategic thinking that alliances are no longer viewed as choices, but as necessities, as structures that inherently reduce the probability of conflict by raising the cost of aggression beyond what any single actor can bear. And yet, within this seemingly stable design lies a contradiction that is rarely confronted, because when nations agree to defend each other, they are not just sharing protection, they are sharing consequences, binding their futures to decisions they do not fully control. And in that binding, risk does not disappear, it begins to move. To understand how this movement of risk operates, it becomes necessary to move beyond the surface-level understanding of alliances as simple defensive arrangements and instead examine them as systems. Because systems behave differently from individual actors. They follow internal logic, they create feedback loops, and most importantly, they produce outcomes that cannot always be traced back to a single decision. And this is where NATO reveals its deeper structure, not merely as a coalition of nations, but as a network where commitments are pre-linked, where responses are partially automated through treaties, and where the actions of one node can propagate through the entire system in ways that are both powerful and unpredictable. At the center of this system lies the principle that has come to define the alliance, the idea that an attack on one member will be treated as an attack on all, a mechanism designed to deter aggression by removing ambiguity and replacing it with certainty. But certainty, while powerful, comes with a cost because it reduces the space for interpretation, for hesitation, for independent judgment. And when decisions are pre-committed in this way, they gain speed but lose flexibility, creating a structure where escalation can occur faster than restraint. This trade-off between speed and control is not immediately visible during periods of stability, because when the system is not under stress, its design appears flawless, coordination seems seamless, and the promise of mutual defense feels unshakable. But systems reveal their true nature only when pressure is applied. And under pressure, the same mechanisms that enable rapid response can begin to amplify uncertainty, because each actor within the system interprets signals differently, reacts based on its own constraints, and contributes to an overall dynamic that no single participant fully controls. What emerges from this structure is a form of interconnectedness that is often mistaken for stability, because the visible coordination between members creates the impression of alignment, but beneath that alignment lies a diversity of interests that cannot be fully reconciled, only temporarily synchronized, meaning that the system is constantly balancing competing priorities, economic considerations, domestic politics, and strategic calculations, all of which influence how each member responds to the same event. And it is within this complexity that the first real tension becomes visible, because alliances do not eliminate conflict. They redistribute it, shifting it from external confrontation to internal negotiation, where disagreements over interpretation, response, and timing must be resolved before action can be taken. And while this process can prevent impulsive decisions, it can also delay necessary ones, creating moments where uncertainty becomes its own form of risk. Historically, this system operated under conditions that made its risks manageable, particularly during the Cold War, when the presence of a clearly defined adversary and the logic of mutually assured destruction created boundaries that, while dangerous, were understood by all participants, resulting in a form of stability that was less about safety and more about predictability. But that stability was never absolute, it was conditional, dependent on the assumption that all actors would behave rationally, that communication would remain intact, and that escalation thresholds would not be crossed unintentionally, assumptions that held for decades, but only because the system was constantly managed, constantly monitored, and constantly adjusted to prevent it from tipping into chaos. In the modern era, the nature of conflict has evolved in ways that challenge these assumptions, introducing forms of engagement that exist below the threshold of conventional warfare, cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, economic pressure, actions that are difficult to classify and even harder to respond to collectively, because they do not fit neatly into the framework that the alliance was originally designed to address. This ambiguity introduces a new layer of tension, because when the definition of an attack becomes unclear, so does the obligation to respond, creating situations where members must decide not only how to act, but whether to act at all. And these decisions, shaped by differing perspectives, can either strengthen the alliance through coordinated response or weaken it through hesitation and disagreement. And once uncertainty enters the system, it begins to interact with its structure in unpredictable ways, because commitments that were designed to provide clarity now require interpretation, and interpretation introduces variation, which in turn affects how quickly and decisively the system can respond to emerging threats. At the same time, the credibility of the alliance depends on the perception that its commitments will be honored, because deterrence functions not just on capability, but on belief. And if that belief is weakened, whether through inconsistent responses or visible disagreements, the system's ability to prevent conflict begins to erode. This creates what can be described as an obligation trap, where acting carries the risk of escalation, but not acting carries the risk of undermining the entire system, forcing members into a position where every decision has consequences that extend far beyond the immediate situation. And yet, despite these risks, the alliance continues to function because it provides benefits that are difficult to replicate through any other structure, combining resources, coordinating defense, and creating a level of deterrence that individual nations would struggle to achieve alone, demonstrating that the system's value is real, even as its vulnerabilities remain embedded within its design. Which leads to the central paradox, because the same interconnectedness that creates strength also ensures that shocks travel further, faster, and with greater impact, turning isolated events into system-wide concerns, and making the alliance both more resilient and more sensitive at the same time. And when the system is viewed in its entirety, what emerges is not a simple story of security or risk, but a structure that transforms how both are experienced, because alliances like NATO do not eliminate danger, they reorganize it, redistributing it across members, accelerating its movement through interconnected commitments, and amplifying its consequences through collective response, proving that security, when shared, becomes something far more complex than protection alone. It becomes a dynamic system, one that can stabilize or destabilize depending not just on external threats, but on how the system itself is managed. And in that reality, the question is no longer whether alliances make nations safer, but whether the systems they create can control the risks they inevitably generate.